You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God, big boy!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek. Hello. And Sean.
Hello.
And in this episode, we'll be discussing the new Ghostbusters movie that just came out this year. The either anticipated or dreaded or hated, definitely one of the movies that's gotten the most hate online that I can remember. But we'll be discussing that in a little bit. First, we'll briefly go through some things we've been watching, and then we'll spend a bit of time on Ghostbusters. We'll do a spoiler-free section of the review, and then go into some spoilers at the end. And just to kick things off on things we've been watching, so I actually went back and watched some episodes of the Real Ghostbusters, the cartoon series from the 80s. And before we recorded this, we actually just watched a few minutes of a different episode. But that's a cartoon that... So a lot of those cartoons from the 80s and 90s, you know, as a kid you loved them and you remember them being objectively good. And some of them weren't. And like, so the Ghostbusters cartoon, it's kind of odd to rewatch it because the voice of Venkman is the same guy that did Garfield. And he's basically talking like Garfield. And then Arsenio Hall was Winston, and the animation style kind of fluctuates a little bit. It's not that great.
There was like no quality control in those 90s cartoons.
Well,
they would range from like acceptable to really awful,
Yeah.
or like Ninja Turtles would have like the wrong bandana color and like just constant errors.
Yeah.
Like even as a kid, I would catch that stuff.
Well, one thing we talked about before, just real brief, like the X-Men cartoon for the first 4 seasons was done by a different company, and in the 5th season it was like completely
some like South Korean or
looked like Captain Planet.
it was from the
awful.
Philippines.
Yeah, but yeah, another one too is like y'all remember the Super Mario cartoon, right?
Yes.
Like I remember as a kid thinking it was good, and I've watched. I think it's been on like Netflix or Hulu or something, and I watched one episode for about 10 minutes and I quit watching it.
The best part of that is the live action segments.
Yeah.
Were those on the Netflix on there?
The
Okay.
one I watched, had live action,
but the
and the Sonic was terrible too.
the Ghostbusters cartoon, because there's a cartoon called Ghostbusters that was a callback to like a 70s show or property or something. So that's why it was called the Real Ghostbusters. So they avoided any copyright issues there. And
They also took a dig at that cartoon because it was the fake Ghostbusters.
but the cartoon did not. It wasn't something that you can watch as an adult, and I think and appreciate the way you did as a kid, as you could with some cartoons, like maybe like the first few seasons of the X-Men animated series. So just watch that just to kind of get the nostalgia going before we watch the new Ghostbusters. And I watched it on Crackle. I think they have like most of season 3 on there. They don't have the entire run of the show, but you can watch some of the episodes and see it. It's where Slimer is a main character and a good guy.
I think it was the DVD I had of the first Ghostbusters. I don't think I have the Blu-ray. You remember that package they released with like Ghostbusters 1, 2, and maybe like a special features disc? It was like in a green package. I think they had a big feature on there about making the cartoon show. Yeah. And I watched that, and it was like a long thing. Or maybe I think they have episodes of the cartoon, and then like a feature on making of it and kind of their process and how they, I guess, formed the idea and like some changes they made, and then talking about working with the animation studio overseas and stuff. It was actually pretty interesting.
And it's like nobody from the original cast was involved, and
Dan Aykroyd, I think, was involved in some capacity. I think, yeah. But like higher up, I don't think he was like writing any episodes or anything.
Produced.
I'm sure Ghostbusters fans will correct us, but
Yeah.
Mom, make me a pizza. I gotta correct these guys.
And that was pretty much the only thing that I watched this week aside from this movie. So I guess we can move on to everyone else to see what they've watched. So Sean, did you watch anything?
I'm trying to think. I watched the new Netflix show Stranger Things, and I was like super excited for that just because it looked good. It kind of looked like one of those, I guess, new retro properties. There's like plenty of movies that come out now and TV shows that kind of go for that 80s vibe. It's something that's kind of almost starting to be overdone. You know what I mean? Like instead of just being something new, it's like, oh, we're going to give you the feeling of how these movies were that you liked or whatever. But in this case, like it's like done so well, and I'm like, actually happy they took this approach with it, because it really does feel like, even the opening of the first episode, it feels like it's E.T. Mixed with X-Files, and then like a hint of Twin Peaks. And that's only because like at the end of that first segment, like there's just dead silence and you're just like looking at something, and it kind of has that, like Twin Peaks when there's emptiness and kind of a void, William, that like you just hear like the atmosphere almost. You don't really hear like nature. You just hear like kind of, I don't know. It's like you can feel the room from the way the audio is playing on screen. Yeah. And it kind of does that a little bit. But I only watched the first episode just because it came out yesterday. We're recording this on a Saturday, and then we went to see Ghostbusters and stuff. But like that's the first Netflix show that isn't like a comedy that I think I want to binge watch. Like I wish I could just leave right now and like go watch the rest of that. I don't know how it'll turn out, but I really like the tone of the show, the approach of it, the look of it. The music isn't fantastic. It's set in '83, so there's like a lot of '80s music mixed in with kind of an original score for it that is very like appropriate for that vibe and stuff. Again, it leans heavily on that stuff. It's, almost like J.J. Abrams Super 8 in that way. Like even the kids are playing D&D, like, in E.T., the beginning of E.T. and stuff. So it leans on that stuff hard, but it is so far the one that's most satisfying because it's not successful so far because it's leaning on that. Like it would be a good show on its own. Again, like Winona Ryder, I told you guys, like I was excited to see her back on screen again. She's awesome in it, like everybody is. So like even if it didn't have that vibe and that setting and stuff, it would still be an interesting show. But it kind of all works together. It doesn't feel disjointed. Like for the story they're telling, for the atmosphere and the tone and kind of the sci-fi elements they're pulling in and some of the mystery. It's the first episode's excellent. So and also I just remember too, earlier in the week I actually did watch E.T. because we watched Jaws recently, and I love that opening scene of E.T. because that's like was kind of scary as a kid when they're like he's like throwing the ball into the shed and stuff. You guys remember that?
E.T. I don't watch E.T. very much.
What was the movie Paul Rudd always uses when he goes on Conan?
Oh, Mac and Me.
Mac and
yes,
Me. That's
yeah.
what I think about. Yeah,
I also watched the Pee-wee's Big Holiday.
I need to watch.
And it starts out with a Mac and Me type alien. It's pretty funny. I think that was about it as far as horror stuff goes. Or Stranger Things. Watched Bernie.
Bernie Sanders.
No, the
This
Richard
dead body.
Linklater
Oh,
film with
Where Jack Black has the dead wife or whatever.
Yeah.
so a Weekend at Bernie's, but with Jack Black and dead
So
wife.
before we move into the Ghostbusters review, something we all watched before we recorded this because it just dropped this week was the trailer for this new Tyler Perry movie.
It looks fantastic.
Boo,
I'm not being sarcastic.
Boo, a Madea Halloween. And like we'll put the link to the trailer in the show notes. Like it just reminds me of like something straight out of the 90s.
Yeah.
Like said, like an episode of Family Matters or
Why Family Matters.
Or well, just because that show had Urkel and all the crazy stuff.
But it had like I used to have one of the only channels I had for a while was TBS when I first moved out, and so I watched a bunch of the Tyler Perry shows, and they kind of had that vibe almost, because like Family Matters had a little bit of comedy, but also like the family stereotypical like melodrama.
Well, it was
stuff.
essentially a more blue collar Cosby family, Cosby show without the implied sexual assault of its creator.
I don't know if that was ever implied in a TV show. I don't think
There's an episode where he gave a bunch of people stuff that made him like woozy and pass out and stuff.
That's pretty realistic.
He hid his
by Bill Cosby.
he hid his fetish in the show.
But it's funny because like I've seen a lot of the Diary of a Mad Black Woman movies, like again because they had TBS and they're like always on there. Used to be like on loop.
I just know like,
and I actually look forward to. I kind of want to see this movie. Like I watch them, like it actually looks like something I want to watch.
We've mentioned before, like we've rewatched, like or at least I've seen Scary Movie 1 and 2 in like the past couple months. And not that they've stopped making movies like that because they've made a lot of movies in that vein since
but they've
then.
Kind of lost.
But they're all terrible
Yeah.
and. Not that those were high art. They were funny at the time. I may not, they may be just as good quality wise, the movie coming out now, it's just I was 16 when I saw that versus now I'm 30.
I think when the Waynes has something to do that they're a little bit better than.
But it's
what's
just like
now.
this feels like, the first thing kind of in that vein that could theoretically be funny.
Well, that too.
And-
Sean also said it kind of looked a little bit like some of the Ernest.
Yeah, like
stuff.
Ernest Scared Stupid or
and
something.
like I agree with it. Like I watch it and it's like as soon as because you shared the poster from there today.
Well, William put it in the group.
Yeah.
Well, all I
And
know
I was
is-
like out somewhere. I was
yeah.
like, oh my God, that is
Yeah, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I'm in. I want to watch this because I don't care what it is. I'm going to watch
The poster says Halloween at the top.
Yeah.
And then it's the poster from Halloween, but with Madea glasses on the pumpkin
Yeah.
and her hand on the knife.
it. Yeah, I just watch. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I want to see this. So
Yeah, I mean, it looks funny. I mean, we'll see. It could be terrible. I mean,
don't
it very
care.
well
I'm
could
You
be.
know
But
what? It's almost like if that movie's really bad, it'll still be kind of funny.
Yeah,
You know,
it's-
like
yeah,
I
that's the
think this,
thing.
it's
Yeah.
almost a win-win.
I just like seeing something that is set on Halloween. It's supposed to be scary and funny. That is aimed at an audience that probably doesn't go to see horror films.
We're going to be packed for movies to cover in October this year. I think,
Yeah.
'cause we've already got some stuff on our plate.
Yeah, because was it so? Next week is so. This week is Ghostbusters. Next week is Lights Out.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then-
Oh, Blind Cable.
And then what?
Isn't that guy supposed to play Cable?
No, that's Don't Breathe. That's
Lights Out.
Lights Out's been getting good reviews.
Yeah, it has.
It was funny is so the
It just looks like that movie about the Tooth Fairy came out in like 2003.
Well, it's based on-
Darkness Falls.
Right
Yeah.
now it has 8 reviews, and they're all really positive.
Was it all from Bloody Disgusting? Like, this movie's great.
I can't remember who it was, but because I posted that link, the Rotten Tomatoes that has the 8 reviews, so it has 100% right now. It's only
Oh,
8
yeah,
reviews.
that's-
It's only 8 reviews,
yeah.
but this was like maybe a week ago, and then I just checked it yesterday, and it was still only 8. So
Well, there's some movies, so I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole in this because I know Derek's my earlier, but it's like a movie like Hush has, I think, only 13 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, which are all positive, so it has a 100% rating, or at least it did the last time I looked. And the thing about Rotten Tomatoes reviews, like, it's not weighted to what the reviews were. If everyone gave it a 3 out of 5, then it's got 100%. Or if everyone gave it a 2.6 out of 5,
yeah,
then it's got 100%. But, as is, like, having a good Rotten Tomato score is an indicator of the movie's quality. Like I said before, IMDb reviews, those aren't super reliable because right now Ghostbusters has a super, super low
It
score.
has like
that's
almost
not-
a 1 because a bunch of
It's
people.
not indicative necessarily of the quality of the films. And you have stuff like, I've said before, like The Dark Knight, which I really enjoyed, but it's not the number one movie of all time.
Oh, it is. According to
And-
IMDb, or it was.
It was. It's not now. It's still in the top 10, but there's a while where people are trying to make it the number one movie on there. And so those reviews are kind of worthless too. So
Yeah.
it's more of just, do you like it? So we'll have to wait and see with
I
Lights Out.
use Rotten Tomatoes as a gauge of, is it worth watching? If it's fresh, then probably. You know what I mean? That's all I kind of use that for.
But yeah, so we'll talk about that next week. But yeah, so I think that covers all the kind of news and things we've been watching before we go into
Yeah,
Ghostbusters.
because I didn't really watch anything horror. I just Lethal Weapon out again this week, so there's no point in talking about that.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it for the 4th or 5th podcast rounding. But
Well, it's just probably one of the best movies ever written. But
so now we'll move into our discussion of Ghostbusters, and we'll leave out any spoilers until the end when we go into
we
spoilers.
designate the spoilers.
So we, give a spoiler warning.
But just so you know, it is a movie about ghosts.
Yes. So this movie, so we're recording it on Saturday, so we don't know what the box office numbers are yet. So that'll be interesting to see how it does for the weekend. Just anecdotally, the times that we all went and saw it, the theaters were pretty barren and empty.
Now,
I saw it at 10:30.
Yeah, we saw it 10:30.
at a different theater than I saw it at. I saw it at 7:30, and there was like maybe 20 people in there.
there was maybe 10 when we went and saw it.
Yeah, there weren't many.
But to be
And we
fair,
don't live like out in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere. Like we live in the city.
but there was like we live in Louisville, so we had like the Forecastle Fest going
Yeah.
on and a couple other local.
I don't know
things.
how much crossover there is between families going to see Ghostbusters.
No, but I
and-
feel like Ghostbusters 2 is like this one felt aimed at more of a younger crowd, and a lot of people that be in the younger crowd.
Here's the thing
be
too,
out there
though.
and
The
stuff.
Ghostbusters. You may not realize this, but a lot of people probably going to Ghostbusters, the Forecastle Festival that is maybe like around 20 or so.
Yeah.
They may have never seen Ghostbusters.
Yeah, that's true,
like
too, yeah.
Our friend Morgan that I worked with when I worked at the TV station, she's, I don't know, maybe 24, never seen Ghostbusters until I let her borrow it. Like there's just no, you know what I mean? Like it was on Comedy Central a lot.
Yeah.
You don't see it on as much anymore. But if you don't like actually take the time to maybe watch it, like that's actually been out of the main public's eye for a very long time. So it may just have a lot of fandom and kind of from people that are 26 and up. But I don't know how interested younger audiences are.
Yeah, that's fair too.
So I think that, kind of pinpoint where this movie falls, because I was talking like with different people about like, if, is this one more or less pointed at kids than the original film? Because the original film was PG because it came out in the era before PG-13 existed, and the original has this movie. So the current one, the new one, they said shit once, I think.
They give the middle finger,
and they said suck it.
Yes.
So you have some of that stuff, but the original had Dan Aykroyd getting a blowjob from a ghost,
a blowjay,
and them talking about somebody having no dick. So there was a little bit more, I feel like, adult humor in the first, and then there was the relationship stuff between, Venkman and Sigourney Weaver's character. I'm mixing all these people. So Bill Murray in Sigourney Weaver's character, and Dana and Peter. So you have all this stuff in the original that made it like, even though it was aimed at kids, and as a kid that was my favorite movies, I was still like, because I was born in '85, so I watched it on video around the time the second one had came out. And I watched the cartoons and all that stuff and loved it. And I feel like I used to, when I was a kid, I would watch the first one and be scared shitless, but loving it. And, then there's adult stuff that I didn't get till I was older. It's like, why did Dan Aykroyd's pants open up and come down? And why do you have that face? And then when you watch it and you're a little bit older, it's like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that because, who was the ghost? It looked consensual, but... But are there laws on interspecies ghost relations?
Well, they're both. It's not like
Love
a dog
wins,
ghost. Yeah.
I'm sure if in real life that could happen, people would be saying that it was wrong and have all these rules against it. But so this new Ghostbusters. So it's a reboot that stars 4 ladies in the lead roles instead of dudes, and it's directed by Paul Feig, who's done a lot of other comedies. And so, you have Kristen...
A lot of other female-driven comedies.
Yeah, like Bridesmaids, The Heat, and some other... Spy. So, movies that star Melissa McCarthy and comedy roles that are typically R-rated films. And in this one, so your lead characters are Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy, Kate McKinnon, Leslie Jones. Then you have a bunch of supporting characters like Chris Hemsworth, who's their secretary... who, he's pretty funny in this.
He's actually, I was kind of surprised by how funny he actually was in it.
When you're talking about how long this film was coming, like when we started the site, it way before that, but when we started the site, I think they were talking about the female-led Ghostbusters, but there was so much news coming out even like two years ago or 2.5 years ago that I was like, let's not post any Ghostbusters. When we were doing a lot more news articles, I was like, no Ghostbusters news, because there's just so much of it and it changes every single day.
The big news initially on it was kind of a couple of writers from The Office were working on a script for Ghostbusters, but they had also written the movie Year One that had Michael Cera and Jack Black. That movie bombed, and I think that kind of
Ivan Reitman wrote that or directed that, right?
I don't remember. I just remember that they wrote it. I just remember that movie was kind of when it was a bomb and didn't do very well at the box office, it seemed like that hurt the prospects of their Ghostbusters property getting made. And, that at the time, like I actually posted a link last week about how they had planned to make Ghostbusters 3 have the original cast, but be kind of like a handing of the guard to like a younger group of Ghostbusters. And, so Harold Ramis directed Year One.
That's what I was thinking of, yes. Okay.
So... you had kind of the idea that this movie that the Ghostbusters 3 was going to be the original cast kind of handing the reins to a younger team, and based on the time it was being made, people were like, oh, is it going to be Seth Rogen and Michael Cera and then somebody else? And so, I think there would have been a backlash against that if they had made it, because I don't think that would have probably been very good. I haven't read that script and I haven't seen what came out of it, but just based on the timing and who all was involved.
Well, Michael Cera's funny though.
I'm not saying he had no attachment at all. I'm just saying that the script idea they had of like Bill Murray's character dying in the first 5 minutes, being a ghost and handing off the reins to a young team. Like, I don't know that I can ever think of an example of that worked. Like, I would just say it would probably be like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where maybe the nostalgia washes over and you think it's okay. Then on further inspection, you're like, no, that's a bad movie that was just masked by 30 years of nostalgia for his character.
What was your what were your feelings on the movie? Because we haven't
So-
even discussed that yet.
Yeah, so-
I'm interested to hear what both of you.
So we've said before, there's a huge internet backlash against the movie, mostly from a vocal minority of people that just didn't want them to be women.
They're like pizza
And then
rolls.
there's also people who are against remakes in general. And those are two kind of different crowds. So then it's all this stuff's conflated. It's like if you don't like the movie, you're sexist. If you do like it, you're being anti-sexist and politically correct. And so there's all these things that are mixed up for people. And just, I tried to watch it without that weighing on my mind. I just tried to go in and, okay, what is this movie? And
It was easy for me because it's just a movie.
Yeah,
you know what
just
I mean?
a movie,
It's
yeah.
a movie.
But
Who
it's-
cares?
yeah.
But I've seen a lot of people say, and I've seen people complain, they're like, oh, well, some reviewers are just going to give it positive reviews because they don't want
Yeah.
the haters to win.
Yeah.
And, I don't, so I think, if you wash all that away and you just look at it, it's not I think that it's good, not great. And I don't think that it was ever bad enough to inspire backlash. I don't think it doesn't tarnish the legacy of the original because aside from the fact they use proton packs,
it's a different movie.
but aside from the fact they use that and there's Ghost, I don't feel like they feel like the same movie at all.
No.
And I don't think it infringes on the original in any way. And to
It
just
doesn't
be clear,
try to mimic the original.
No.
That was probably the biggest thing where things can go bad. If say the Evil Dead remake, people were afraid, somebody's going to try to do Bruce Campbell. It's like everybody in this has their own brand of humor. It all works for the story. It's built around them.
they don't have characters. They didn't just take 4 female leads and map them to the original characters.
Exactly, yeah.
But-
that's why it works.
And so you didn't have them
But
doing
no, they
that.
do, though, is
but
like-
I do feel like beat by beat, it hit all the major plot points of the original.
A little bit, but one thing too is that you got established good comedians. Like Melissa McCarthy is actually really funny and has had successful movies. So is Kristen Wiig, and a lot of these other people are like known. So so it wasn't like they went and kind of got 4 lesser known people and, like you said, try to make them act like Bill Murray.
They got so I
Then
think
you would have had that Dumb and Dumber sequel
Yeah.
they did years ago. Not the new one with
Yeah, the
Jim
Dumb and
Carrey.
Dumber
the
too.
Yeah.
So I think what happened here is, I think that the lead, so like people are complaining about the female leads. Like the female leads are what drives the movie. And, if they didn't have the comedic performances they did, then the movie wouldn't be good at all. Because I feel like the problems with the movie are the direction and the story. And it just felt like, they have this cast and they have this high concept, but it felt like a lot of the action set pieces were just over CG. It was CG everywhere. And they didn't feel like there was much inventiveness to the sequences. Like there's a sequence I was telling Derek, there was like a few characters around a window. And it was all very stoic. Like nothing about it was interesting. Like it was like, oh, there's this struggle. But if you'd had a director who's really, visually driven, in charge, and has a good sense of action, like a Sam Raimi directing that sequence, that could have been batshit insane and been amazing. But as is, it just felt like they shot it more like a comedy than an action film.
well, I was happy
I
with that,
understand,
though.
Not that the
obviously-
original was like this whiz bang.
Yeah, that's
action
what I'm
Yeah,
saying. The
it
original was
wasn't.
mainly a comedy. I wouldn't even
Yeah.
consider it an action comedy.
No.
So I'm totally fine because, and I'm not saying I'm not dissing Sam Raimi as far as his comedic sensibilities, because all of his stuff is usually right on. There was some stuff in Spider-Man 3 that could have been in the
dancing.
studio, whatever. But for me, I actually I kind of loved the film, and I was glad that he directed this because
Or Paul Feig.
Paul Feig directed this because his comedic sensibilities was so consistent throughout. Not everything hit for me.
Yeah.
Not everything did, but mostly I would take the comedy in this over some slightly better directed action. You know what I mean? I'm glad he's the one that did this because it was his sensibilities, and who else to kind of do a female-led Ghostbusters? If it would have been guys, that would have been more compared to the original, I think, even more so now. Granted,
Yeah.
there may not been much of a backlash, but I'm glad he did this. For me, I would pick the little small comedic moments being as strong as they are over the action, because I don't really care about the action in this movie.
some of
it was
it-
just, it had to be there, and it's a movie in 2016, so they got to have bigger action set pieces. They got to have motorcycles blowing up like they did in the alley. You know what I mean? That stuff would have never been in the original. They do a little, they blow up some stuff, but it just feels, that other one felt like a very much smaller film in that way.
And I actually really enjoyed Dupinder from Deadpool in it. Because he was the taxi driver from Deadpool, was the food delivery guy.
Oh yeah.
And I really enjoyed his.
Yeah, he was
spots.
great.
So areas that this movie was on point was the guest stars that it had. in like the various small roles they interact with, like Zach Woods, who is
man.
Jared from Silicon Valley, and he was Gabe on The Office.
Yeah, I mean, like that kind
The
of
opening
starts the
was
film
great.
off on a right foot, and it's hilarious.
He's so great at just like throwing in like under his breath like small jokes about P.T. Barnum and some other stuff.
Yeah.
So that opening part was hilarious. But I think like just kind of the main Ghostbusters is how did they do? So I think that Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy are kind of like the characters that ground the entire movie with like having a friendship and all this stuff. And I think they did a fine job. Leslie Jones did a great job in the role she was in as Patty, as the MTA worker. I do feel like there was opportunity for them trying to be progressive to make the black character not just be the street smart one that gets brought in midway through the movie. They could have made her one of the scientists, because they essentially just gave her the Ernie Hudson role again.
Yeah, but
And I feel like they could have done a little bit more.
Yeah,
with
but
that.
I haven't, I've watched a ton of the new SNL, but I've seen Leslie Jones on there quite a bit, and like, when she's given the opportunity, it seems like she plays up that personality of
Yeah,
hers.
she
You know what I
did.
mean? Like that's how she's funny, I think. So for me, I don't think they should have shoehorned her into like a more progressive role just to kind of give service to that. I
mean,
I think they should have played her strengths, and for me, like she nailed
Yeah,
what
she
she
did.
did.
Yeah,
I
she
think
was
they
great.
could have easily had her just be like a straight-laced professor who then like didn't think the paranormal existed.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoyed her.
I thought that her
character, like
I thought her
just liked
performance.
all
I
of
thought
it.
her performance was great, and I thought that
Yeah.
she was good in the movie. It just felt like they could have just not made her character be like the wage
token
laborer
black girl. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. But for me, like, honestly, there's a lot of things it does with, it does play with some things like kind of subverting, I guess, stereotypes as far as, what's his name, the receptionist?
Chris Hemsworth as Kevin.
Chris Hemsworth,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was actually really
he's
funny.
he's the dumb blonde, but
Yeah.
he's a
He's-
guy, like I enjoyed some of that, but it at another level too, like I don't care about it being a so-called feminist film or all that stuff. Like for me, I just sat down in the theaters. I didn't think about
Well, I didn't
anything
even
else
get
other
that
than
from it.
that's what I'm saying. Like,
He
I was not
essentially-
thinking about any of that
Yeah.
or
He
any of the
essentially
roles
was
anybody
Kelso
plays.
from that '70s show.
Yes,
But funnier.
dumber.
But like I just sat there and enjoyed it and didn't think about what they were trying to say with certain things, or maybe parts they may have failed as far as
the movie
representing
itself-
certain,
The movie itself, like there's no romance subplots or anything,
Which
like
is
that.
good.
It felt like if you were to ask me, like it felt like they could have written this script and all the main characters were left either gender, and they just happened to pick women. And then because there was nothing specific to their femininity that really played into it, aside from like one line from Kristen Wiig's character, Erin's boss, when she was a professor, about her like the way she dressed.
But she also like the next scene, she had like a 1970s like Mary Tyler Moore Brown outfit on too,
But
which I
it's-
really enjoyed.
So like out of them, like we said, so the main cast, like I thought everybody did good, but like so Kate McKinnon's character Holtzman, I've seen people who loved it and thought she stole the movie. And my camp I kind of fall into is it didn't feel like a real character. It felt like a bunch of quirks from like a younger kids film, like a film aimed at even younger kids. Because all she did was say goofy stuff and didn't feel like there was a single defining characteristic, like she was a real person that you could talk to. It just felt like it was a bunch of like quippy jokes and then a bunch of like facial expressions and actions meant to draw laughter from small like 4 to 5 year old children.
I laughed a lot. Like
Yeah,
I really liked her. I laughed a lot at her, and like you said, I think Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy's character grounded it, and I think it gave room for her because they kind of had your kind of story cores with them. She got to be kind of a third character that is even different than anybody in the original Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
She's like the person that is involved with. She's like excited about the tech and making all the weapons, and I almost think that's like something that probably a lot of younger Ghostbusters fans back in the day would have loved to have out of any of those properties, was somebody that makes all the gadgets, because that's what everybody thought was so cool.
Yeah.
But even still, like this film, they really play that up, where she's somebody that kind of just loves that part of it. And I think she was enough of a character for me that I was fine her being kind of just kind of a side character that kind of popped in, was like more of the comic relief. Like she was definitely more broad in her comedy, but she was so funny. Like I love those little pops in the middle of everything. I felt like it was well balanced.
I like too. One thing, I kind of like the way that she dressed too, because it's so ridiculous.
Yes,
It was because like she had that 80s-ish style, and then Kristen Wiig dressed kind of like she's from the 70s almost.
Well,
so.
Kristen Wiig dressed like frumpy professor from Columbia, which is what she was, and in the original, like with Venkman and Egon and everything. But like, I think that. Like I said, I think that the character of Holtzman may be an example of like her hairdo and stuff initially made people think of Egon's character from the Ghostbusters cartoon series, the Real Ghostbusters, like with this kind of pompadour haircut. And I think that they kind of visually did that, but then had her go so far in the other direction in terms of the character's actions, so it didn't seem like she was trying to ape something from the original. I don't know. Like I've seen people who like that, and I know you all seem to like it.
I liked it.
I just felt like it was a character from a PG-rated or a G-rated kids film version of this series.
I didn't really get that because at one point she sexually licked a gun, and she...
It wasn't sexually.
And
she
then
just licked it.
And then she says another line about an AA meeting and stuff. Like,
so I don't really get that. I don't feel... I mean, I don't watch many child movies.
I just feel like...
I didn't get that.
I feel
from
like
her
that
at one point.
like if you took a 6-year-old kid to see this, they would get way more from that character than I did. Granted,
I don't know, because a lot of the stuff she talked about was from like the 80s, and they made like a bunch of references and stuff like Sean said, like that I don't think a 5-year-old would get. Maybe
but
the
too, like,
facial expression they might
I totally
laugh
get
at.
that she's kind of split on some people because,
I mean, I don't like her as an actress and in SNL and everything. But
yeah, Melissa McCarthy and
Kristen Wiig.
Kristen Wiig, like their characters are more grounded and they're kind of not too far one side or the other. Like they're kind of more subdued in their comedy. They're really funny and they're not super outlandish. Or Kate McKinnon, she's kind of out here and she's kind of taking things a little further than some of the other characters are in the movie. So I get how some people would think she was a little bit too out there for them, but for me, like I loved her brand of humor in it, and then even like I've heard some complaints about Chris Hemsworth's character about kind of the humor that is kind of deployed at his expense and kind of the things he does. And yeah, it's further out there than the original Ghostbusters, but I loved it too. Like, it reminded me almost something more of like out of Airplane or something.
Yeah.
Like it was super funny though.
Yeah, and one thing too, like about him doing that is like I'm so used to seeing him as like obviously Thor.
Yeah.
Most people would know him, and to see him go from like super Asgardian god type character to trying to reach for a phone inside of a fish tank multiple times, like it's funny. And like a lot of the stuff he did was like, you kind of know people like that do things like, I don't want to get into any of the spoilers or anything, but there's certain things that he does in this movie that like people do for fashion statements, and he's kind of poked at it, made it ridiculous.
So like we said, like so the performances, like I thought overall they were good, and if you had different people in the roles, the movie might not have worked.
No, I don't.
I just thought that they went a little bit broad and kiddie humor with a little bit of it. And two, like just not to compare it to the original a lot, but in the original, after watching the original Ghostbusters, you have a general idea of what it would be like to interact with all those characters in real life. Like you got enough personality from them to know like how it would be kind of hanging out with them. With this movie, I don't think you got that.
Well, one thing I can say is,
and that's what made the original so likable.
I think this one lacked a little bit of the charisma that the original had, and like you said, there wasn't as much.
But the original is like soaked in charisma.
Yeah,
like there's not many comedies that even touch that.
It's funny though, is we say it's soaked in charisma, but it's almost kind of dry. Like the way that the movie is, like the humor's very dry.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas this is the very opposite.
Like in the original, you have like a very throwaway line by Egon, or like Venkman and Egon, where he's like, remember that time you tried to drill a hole in your head? And he's like, it would have worked if you let me.
Yeah. Or like
it felt like a very real place.
Yeah.
And and I totally agree with this not touching that. Not being all the way there in that direction, but I still feel like this is more of a fully realized world than like 80% of the comedies. You know what I mean? Like this is still is like above and beyond.
So there's a couple of levels too. It's like if you're comparing this to the original, if you're comparing this to this summer's blockbusters, and you're comparing this to the average summer blockbuster, and two, like when you have that charisma and the nostalgia factor of the original, you're gonna have a very hard time for anyone to top like the nostalgic version of it you built up in your mind.
Yeah, you're not going.
So I don't think this reaches the heights of the original. I don't think in 10 years people are going to watch this and as a favorite. Maybe kids will though. I don't know, because watching that the Real Ghostbusters cartoon, which I loved when I was little, it's like it doesn't quite hold up.
I think
there's a lot more. Here's the difference between the 1984 Ghostbusters and this one. In 1984, there weren't many properties out there that was kind of dealt with the fantastical or whatever, that was like bigger movies that kind of even had that horror comedy tone. Like, it wasn't a big thing back then. Now there are so many other things competing for kids' attention and kind of movies that they may like or follow. Like, it's just so crowded with you got the Marvel movies. Like, there's a lot of things that
there's
aren't
way
just
more
standard like comedies or
So, like, a movie from last summer that Sony also put out, I think that you compare this one to quite heavily, is Goosebumps, because I feel like it falls in the same wheelhouse. And I think this is better than Goosebumps, but so like we said, so the performances are pretty good, with some minor quiggles here and there, but the story, I feel like, very closely, like it tries to be new and fresh, but I think it stays close enough to the original plot line of they see a ghost, they use the creations and inventions they have to capture the ghost.
That's all you can do with
they
it.
get in trouble or get have a run-in with the mayor's office and then have to save the day.
Yeah, but I mean, but really,
but that's the first movie, the second movie.
There was a great line too that Kristen Wiig says to the mayor too inside the diner that I love.
But like what you said though, it's kind of like that's what these movies are.
Well,
that's
just,
really all you can do with
but
it.
I feel like
unless you put it in Utah and there's like 5 people, then you're not gonna run into that.
Okay, I think the point I was trying to make was it's more of a remix of the original than like a straight plot point for plot point remake. But I feel like one thing too is like even though this has a bigger budget and it's set in New York just like the original, this version of New York feels more closed in and less expansive and less like the real New York than the first film.
I think the problem I have with this one is
but that's also they shot things tighter and
but there was not a lot of ghost busting in this film.
Well, there's not in the original film. There's not a lot.
No,
either.
But they imply it
because
because
they
through
show
the
a
radio
montage.
and they have
That's
like
the
Casey,
thing that I felt like this was missing too about them like going around like the montage.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I miss.
Could you put another montage in there? Like then it would be another plot point.
Yeah.
It was like, oh well, this is their montage.
It feels like I said, like
that was the biggest thing lacking to me. Is like
me too. Like that was an oddly thing, but
That
like,
they didn't
do you
do
want
that.
the same? Like I don't know. Would I rather have the same thing? I kind of think I do, but then again,
to me,
it would have been too close.
It kind of feels like they didn't earn the mantle of the Ghostbusters because they really didn't do it.
I think they don't earn it till the end of the film.
Well, too,
you know what I mean?
like I said with the New York thing, I don't know, like if everybody like to me, like the original New York, I felt like they shot it wider. They had them walking through the city, like the end stuff when they go to the building. Like a lot of it felt like New York. This one, it was all shot kind of tighter interiors. It didn't feel as much of like a living,
they
breathing
had enough
city.
driving around that I felt like it was okay. Like, yeah, they weren't running around a lot, but like they even showed the library from the first film, I think, and one of the because we went to New York like I think last year, so we went to the library and stuff, and like I think we noticed the library in the shot when the cars like driving down the street, like and the firehouse. We visited the firehouse. Like for me, going to New York last year, I felt like it was enough. But I agree that it didn't kind of touch on the same feel of New York as the first one.
I think another thing too, though, is we watch a lot of other you watch a bunch of like MCU movies and they make it feel so expansive, and you go watch movies like this.
I'm just talking about the lenses they use and stuff.
Yeah, but because
the original film. No, I'm just saying the original Ghostbusters, like when they're leaving the college. It was like shot wide. You see them walking around and people.
See the whole
this,
city.
it felt all tight, like it was shot in other. I think it was mostly shot in Boston. Actually, the original was shot some in New York, some in L.A., and this one, like I said, was shot mostly in. I think Boston was the major filming location. Yeah. It just felt like they shot things tight and it didn't feel as expansive and as much like New York as the original.
But
did.
I think they're up. I think it's probably. I know New York's kind of made it. They keep going back on forth on it if it's like cheaper and easier to shoot in New York or whatever. But I'm sure it was way easier to shoot in New York back in 1984. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's too much of a fault.
Well, too, you're talking about what 30 plus years.
Well, I'm just saying like
city growth and population.
Yeah.
So
You can create the feeling of being there without being there. Just like that's like a minor filmmaking quibbles. I felt like they shot a lot of tighter lenses, but so you have like those things. So the other big thing is the special effects. So the original one uses practical special effects, and they have like wire work and stuff for the floating books, and kind of hokey old school practical effects that I think generally hold up, and you can't really notice too many flaws with them. This one, the ghosts are all almost completely 100% CG, and the one thing that was I think that kind of downplays like from this movie, I couldn't tell you a single ghost aside from Slimer. Like the original, you had Slimer and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that were permeated pop culture. I don't think the villain from this film is going to permeate pop culture in the same way.
No.
And I don't think that any of the individual ghosts, because they all had like green or like blue auras around them and like trails. So that kind of sameness between the designs made it so that none of them really seemed that unique. And I don't think that, anybody's really going to remember any specific ghost. Not that you remember a ton of ghosts from the original ones.
I mean, I don't.
But you had,
except for Slimer.
but I think you had those. And then the originals, you had like Slimer, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, the like Zul's or whatever's dogs, and like stuff like that was creepy. And that, I think those are a little bit more iconic than anything in this film. And I've seen reviews say that this new one is scarier than the original. I still think that the scene in the original where Dana's in her apartment and like all the hands grab her through the chair and like the one like grabs her like from like
Crotch.
Yeah, on the crotch and all that stuff. I thought that was a genuinely scary moment that would have fit in with like a horror film, as opposed to this one had like one or two jump scares. But I don't think anybody
I feel like
was
this
scared.
one was more, for me, I do feel like this one's a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
The horror. Like my wife jumped at one of the parts too.
Yeah.
The other one, I wasn't. See, I wasn't even scared of the original one as a kid. I don't ever remember being scared of that film. The Dana thing was like really cool, but I never felt like it was like scary. I just thought it was like, oh, a little thing.
Or like when the dog's chasing Louis Tully
Yeah.
through the park. Like I just feel like maybe this one is scary. I don't know, because I'm kind of judging it off when I saw the original when I was 4.
This one's,
but-
I mean, people get thrown around like, what I mean? There's a few things in this, and I feel like they really I think he does his best as far as building up the horror, and I think he like did a pretty good job.
Now,
at it.
one thing you
Not
said
stellar,
about ghost design, I do have to disagree with you a little bit, because when I saw the subway ghost, I immediately thought of the ghost from the second one in the courtroom.
the Scolari brothers.
Yeah, and that's immediately what I thought.
Yeah,
I was like,
thinking
that
about that
reminds
too.
me of the Scolari brothers
Yeah.
so much.
And
So
she
I
kinda
disagree
gave
with you a little
backstory
bit.
again too. Like,
Yeah.
oh, they used to.
Yeah, they did.
There was a good joke about them electrocuting some.
Yeah, and it
some
took so
people.
long they started shooting him in the head. Yeah, like I enjoyed something like that. So I had to disagree with you a little bit on the ghost design, because I do remember that one. That one stuck.
But
with
wouldn't
me.
you say that the majority of them are just a CGI character that's kind of indistinguishable?
But name one other ghost outside of the main ghost. To name one ghost besides Slimer in the original that's not a main one.
And two,
oh wait a minute, you can't.
And two, you've watched the original like 100
100 times.
you know?
So yeah, you've
it's
watched
hard
it
to-
since you
for
were
me, it's
4,
hard to
so
judge
it's
that.
unfair.
But I do agree with like the
in my-
dog chasing. Like there's
Yeah.
more variety of sequences maybe in that original.
Well, too, like
I totally agree with that.
And like people claim like a criticism kind of both of them, the original and the new one, is that there wasn't enough busting of ghosts, because in the original one,
It was just implied.
I'm just saying the original one, they capture Slimer, and that's kind of that, and they have like the montage, and then they have kind of the end stuff at Dana's apartment.
Yeah.
As opposed to this one, they have them like seeing a ghost, and then they have the like a concert demon thing where it's kind of like an over
I
design.
wasn't really crazy about that.
That
but-
was like talking about like movies being dated and stuff. Like I think that rock concert will kind of date the movie, even because
I mean, the music was really bad by years ago standards. Like it was very generic.
Yeah, well, I don't understand why they couldn't
kill that scene for
no,
me.
but it didn't.
Could have been. It could have been elevated.
I'm just
being
really
someone
glad they
that
didn't
was-
have a Fall Out Boy song under that.
But being to someone that's like into heavier metal and rock and stuff, I'm not going to call it rock, but like,
But that was like a kids movie version of a rock concert.
yeah,
it
it
wasn't,
absolutely was.
because otherwise it would be super,
but
super low lights.
If you're ever going to do that, you have to go back to Ace Ventura and use
Cannibal
stuff like that.
Holocaust.
Yes, and just do that and go all out. But they didn't, and they picked, like you said, a generic.
And two,
rock
so if
band.
everybody like we complained, or didn't really complain, but we just kind of critiqued the Fall Out Boy version of the song.
It was not good.
And luckily, it's very lightly used in the film, and they
Yeah.
mostly stick with the original theme for most of the music cues.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe a little bit of spoilers, because when it did come, when the title screen came on, I was so happy that I was like, okay, good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That
They only
isn't-
used the Fall Out
They
Boy
would have
one once.
ruined
Yeah.
the opening of this. And honestly, I didn't feel like the opening was super strong. Like, I feel like they kind of downplayed the music even.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a weird complaint, but, they kind of show the first scene. The music comes in, the Ghostbusters original theme comes in, and they have the title. But I feel like it's almost played low and then kind of goes out. Like, I want it to be kind of like, I was hoping that would have like amped you up for the movie.
Yeah.
As good as that opening sequence
Well, I kind of
was.
liked the little piano version they used too throughout
yeah.
the movie. I would have liked them to use that more, but I don't know. Like when I look at this one, I try not to compare it directly to the original. But even if you do, like, I don't think it comes anywhere near falling flat on its face. I think it stands up pretty well on its own. I know they're just different movies. Like, it's hard to even compare them, other than the fact that they share the same name and they have the same principle, but they did it so differently.
I laughed all the entire time in the theater, and like I super enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I
yeah.
laughed the whole time, and that was my only barometer for enjoying it, because that's what I do with comedies.
That's what it's
like,
supposed
and
to
I
be.
wish
I loved it.
I wish I had seen this with a larger group of people, because I think comedies are played
Comedies
up
and
when
horror
you
movies.
when you have a good audience for a comedy. I think it makes it easier to laugh and get into it when other people are into it, versus if you just sit and watch it yourself. Like, there were some laugh out loud moments, and there were some funny things, but I don't think there was. I can't sitting here right now, aside from like there's a certain phrase, we won't spoil what it is, that
Got 2 words for you.
there's a certain phrase that I always think is funny, just mainly from watching wrestling as a kid,
Because nobody uses it.
and they use but there's no real iconic lines from any of the characters that I can sit here and think about.
I mean, like I said, we can go into spoilers here in a second and kind of talk about some of that. You want to go into that real quick?
So I guess we can just kind of do like the final thoughts on this. Final thoughts. It did not deserve the hate that it got, because it wasn't bad enough to drive any type of hate. Even if, so I think out of everybody here, I'm probably the coolest on it, because I
Like
thought
Fonzie cool? Like,
no, or I'm the one who has. I like it the least.
You're not as hot on it.
okay, you're not as high. I think
I'm-
coolest is think of the fun.
No, I'm just saying, it's just like,
Out.
I mean, I think it's a good enough movie, and if kids and it gives little girls, similar to what Ray did in Star Wars Force Awakens, if it gives young girls like active protagonists to look up to, like, I think that's great, and I think that's better as a social statement than as a movie, because as a movie, I think it's kind of forgettable. Like, I don't think I'll go back and watch this. Like, I don't. Like I said, you never know, like, through the nostalgia tinged lenses of watching stuff as a child, like, it stays with you, but I just don't think there's as much culturally relevant dialogue or iconic moments coming out of this movie. And the third act, like, all those movies kind of have, kind of dull third acts. Like, this one, I thought the third act was just a mismatch of CG that kind of is how every movie works. And I think that, there's a lot more action happening here, way more action than the end of the first film, with like Zool and Gozer and all that stuff.
Yeah, but how much different was the budget?
Yeah, like that first one, they just kind of stand on the roof.
Yeah.
But so there's, like I said, there's way more going on. I think to the movie's detriment, because in the third act they kind of ignore all the rules they've set up previous about how ghosts work. Because it goes,
But it's still kind of funny.
I mean, it's funny, but the logic goes from you have to use.
Oh, no, don't even use logic. They're hunting ghosts with
No, I'm just
nuclear
saying,
proton packs.
it's been set
Don't
up.
give me
It's been
logic.
set up that all the beams do are hold the ghost, and then they use
But
the
they
traps
use
to
different.
capture
No,
them.
but they use different weapons. They didn't use
Yeah.
beams, so
Yeah.
you're wrong.
It
Because
just felt
they
like
didn't use the
a cheat, because it was too boring just to have them trying to capture the ghost, so they had to come up with something else to have
Well, they
an
hadn't-
action set piece.
I think that's.
spoilers.
I think it was I kind of like that change of the universe, because that was the thing. Even with a lot of the games and stuff, the games would change it to where there was some ghosts you could just shoot, some
Yeah.
you would have to trap, because trapping it over and over
Just
gets
gets
boring on an
yeah,
action.
repetitive.
So for them going forward, I think it was smart to set this universe up to where, like, okay, if they use the normal guns, they've got to trap them, but
I like the
they all
chipper.
have their like special weapons that, like, okay, we can have some fun action scenes.
Yeah.
Granted, not the best action scenes, but they can do something else to mix it up so they're not trapping like 50 million ghosts.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really enjoyed it because, like I said, I went in and all the neckbeards had told me that this was the worst movie ever, that it was an atrocity.
And you said you liked it maybe better than 2?
Oh, I liked it way better than
Yeah.
2. 2 did not entertain me.
Well, 2 is just so I'll have to link
I'll
it
say
to,
this. Well, this is one thing I was going to say earlier, and you all may or may not disagree or agree with me, or may disagree with me, whatever. I think based on what I saw from this one and the original Ghostbusters, this would make a better trilogy than the original, because I
well,
think
the original
that it's
wasn't
so,
meant to be sequelized.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying is this
they
one
definitely set this up for sequels.
yes, and I think that's one thing too.
But
is
it's
that
its own film too.
it's its
It
own
doesn't
film.
feel like they're just
it
trying
does
to-
not feel like it's
not a half a movie.
no.
They have
This
a
is
fully contained
a fully
arc.
contained arc, and if this was just say this, they never made another one, you wouldn't be like, oh man,
No.
But I think that the way this one was made, which was definitely made in the idea of making more, it's set up for a.
Well, you can't make a franchise film these days without making it intended to be the starter of multiple sequels.
What I'm trying to say is, like, the way that the first Ghostbusters, the original, was done, that it was just a one-off movie. It was very good. It could never replicate what they did in the original. They kind of set the bar pretty high, and they could not do it again. And then Bill Murray didn't even really want to do it. So I think with this one, the way they did it, it worked really well. And if it doesn't come out successful enough to get another one, it's not going to I'm not going to be crying any tears. But I would definitely watch a sequel because I think now they could better. Now that you've got the characters and you've fleshed out some of the stuff, the second one could be a little smoother. And I really enjoyed it. I don't know, I don't do ratings, so I'm not going to give it like a rating out of whatever. But I feel like if, you're looking for a good, fun movie to see and you've liked any of these actresses, any of the stuff they've done, or you liked any of the other movies, if you liked Bridesmaids, or if you liked, what was the one?
I keep talking about Spy because if you like the way, like, Chris Hemsworth is in this, Jason Statham is like, they also subvert that, like, action hero role in that. That movie is so good.
What's the one with Jason Bateman and Melissa McCartney?
Oh, Identity Thief.
Yeah, if you liked Identity
Thief. That wasn't
Thief.
a Paul Feig movie, though.
No, but it had her in it. Yeah, I'm not talking about the director. But I think if you like movies like that, then check it out. It's worth it. You're not going to be disappointed.
Like, if I had to give it a score out of 10, like, we never do that because it's kind of a pointless exercise because what's a 6 versus a 9 versus an 8 or whatever. But, like, so on IMDb, it's got a really low rating, like below 4, I think. So I think that an accurate rating for this movie would be somewhere like in the high 7s.
Yeah, that's what I would. That's what I would.
Honestly,
fair.
I hardly ever rate anything on IMDb, and I was on the page and I saw it had a 4, and I'm like, oh, I know people downvoted this before it came out. I'm sure they probably did.
Oh, it was huge.
And
18 to 44.
I actually rated it an 8, William. So we may be like right there, but our people's opinions of 8s may be different than others.
But I'm right there with all y'all. I think 7 or 8 is. I think it's a very. I think it's a very fair.
It's got a 4.6 right now.
Yeah, but I think that's a very fair rating for it. Like, it didn't set the world on fire. It wasn't like, oh my God, guys,
See, the original has a 7.8, so I definitely think it deserves the same as the original. Maybe it's like a low 7.
But I watched it. I was really happy with it. There's some parts that I actually like. This one actually has more laughable comedy than the original, and maybe two. And
I would argue, like, I think a lot of the humor...
but it's a different
tone.
You're talking about 30-something years difference, and you're talking about what was funny in the 80s is
humor
not funny in
styles
2016.
change, like, it's totally a new
if you did the same stuff, it'd be like, what was the point? We don't want another skin falling off movie.
So I think that
you don't want the direct remake.
I think that too. Like,
Cabin Fever. Yeah,
so I think that a reason that a lot of people who are fans of the original, so a lot of people hate remakes in general, and regardless of who's involved or who's doing them, they hate remakes. And I think part of it is because, and I got a tinge of this myself and had to kind of temper that down. It's like, okay, be reasonable. It's like you see reviews and people are like, oh, this is far funnier than the original film. And then you're like, oh, you're shitting on this thing that I love with this thing that's not as good. So you have like that feeling. But when you actually examine it, it's a different type of humor. Like I said, it's more of like, there's probably more laughs per minute than the original. Like I said, like I was talking to him, like
there's very subtle humor in
the original is very subtle. It's very deadpan. A lot of it was ad-libbed by Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. And there's a lot of movies that I watch that are comedies where I don't sit there and laugh very much, but I love the humor involved in it. Because the thing that's actually made me laugh the most out loud the past 4 years has been the TV show Silicon Valley. And I don't think this reaches like the same level of jokes that does, but I think there's more jokes per minute than the original Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
It's a different type of humor.
and that's not always not always good or worse.
Yeah, but you're talking
absolutely
about
because it is a different feeling.
Yeah, but you're talking about different writers, different director, completely different style of actors in it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like,
so somebody similar. Somebody about 30 years difference.
Somebody flying around and bumping into stuff and blowing things up can be funny one time through, but I don't think it's funny on repeat viewings as opposed to really dry humor can be hilarious.
I don't know. I mean, and two, though, maybe it's not necessarily they're flying around. It's also what some of them say. Because like Leslie Jones had some funny comments in that. So somebody it's just like a gator, just ride it out. Like that's funny, because it's something that was really subtle and they didn't play it up real loud. Just kind of like a ADR moment.
So I think we move into spoilers real quick. Let me for me, I really loved it, and I say this about some movies and then I end up not doing it, but like I think I want to buy this film. And
I definitely
for me too. Like I'm almost done watching those originals, and not like the same way I was with Star Wars, where I was just like kind of sick of it. This, I'm just like, I've seen it a lot. Yeah. I've seen those first movies so many times, where now I'm kind of excited there's something else fresh that's in that same realm. Yeah. And I like this. I thought this was a very strong film. So I'm like excited to watch this again.
Man. And one other thing too I want to say real quick, and just to see what y'all think. I'm not saying this is like a complete passion project, but I think they went in with
the best
intentions. Yeah. They didn't. This was not Poltergeist. This was not a money grab. Yeah. I mean, like Sony tried to make money off. I'm not saying they didn't, But the people that they put in it, and the actresses, and the director, and the writing
They spent
staff,
a lot of time.
They spent a lot of time
Listening to interviews
trying-
with Paul Feig, like he was a huge fan of the original and didn't want to get involved with directing a new Ghostbusters until they kind of decided to, make it not be attached to the originals and try to, have all those original actors and characters in there because he knew that was kind of doomed to fail.
Yeah.
But
And real quick, too, we interviewed Ryan Kemp, who was like a founder of the Western Kentucky Ghostbusters, like at Scarefest years back. He's a huge Ghostbusters fan. Anyway, they put his name in the credits of the film.
That's pretty cool.
yeah, because he
at the very
tragically
end.
passed away in a
Oh,
car
yeah.
accident
Yeah.
like a year or so ago.
Yeah, so I got a screenshot of that too whenever I stayed for the end to get that. So we'll put it up in the show notes and stuff.
Yeah,
pretty
so,
awesome.
So, like, just reading that alone, I was like, okay, so Paul Feig is that he actually
Met with him,
actively campaigned and met with the fan base of the Ghostbusters, not the people on the internet who you hate, but the people who go to all these conventions because there's like different chapters of Ghostbusters across the country where people have a lot of times like their own version of Ecto One, and they all have like their jumpsuits and proton packs and go to these conventions and do a lot of really cool stuff. And he was meeting and talking to those people, the people who actually love the franchise and the series and the characters, versus people who go online on Reddit and just sucks, get these ladies out.
Where's the meatloaf?
And
then
two, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that in this movie they do directly address some of the criticism, which I think they could have probably left out because I think that kind of. I mean,
I thought that the comments they made were funny regardless. Like, I think those comments, even if you didn't know any context for it, in 5 years would still be
I
funny.
don't know. I just feel like a lot of times it's better to not acknowledge the haters
Yeah.
and just to move on.
Just to bring up like from X-Men Apocalypse, and like the third one's the worst. Like, yeah, hold off on that.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I like the X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah.
I don't think that,
Yeah.
but anyway, like it just sometimes you hear stuff like that, and it's like,
Yeah,
I think it worked for me. It worked for
yeah.
this.
I didn't really. I would have to almost have you all tell me the lines because I never picked that up.
Y'all want to go into
so.
spoilers now?
Yeah, I
so
think
before we
it's-
move into spoilers, just does us a huge favor if you're listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, to go out to iTunes and leave a review because that helps other people find the podcast and helps us move up the rankings. And you can also find all the work we're doing at houseboundvideostore.com, where you can find links there to all of our social media accounts: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Vimeo, Vine, everything. You can find all that there. We're going to have a teaser trailer coming out for the short film we did, Hazard, relatively soon, so keep an eye out for that. And if you also want to do us a huge favor, you can always go out to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/HBTVS, and donate some amount of money to that, because that just helps us pay for a lot of the kind of site maintenance stuff and podcast server fees and trying to work towards more original projects.
Almost like you were about to say something satanic.
No.
Like no, you're like I almost hit it pays for us or satanic
because we did Hazard, and then there's some other original projects we're thinking about trying to do sometime soon, and then Sean's gonna be doing a segment on anthology film that somebody else is producing,
Volumes of Blood, horror stories.
so you can keep an eye out for all that at the site. And if you want to find us on the internet specifically, you can find me on Twitter at Will_Droid.
You can find me on Twitter,
At MetaWorld
yeah,
Derek.
at MetaWorld Derek, and Instagram, Tumblr, a bunch of other stuff.
And I'm at Blevins Sean on Twitter and at Sean2D2 on Instagram.
So now we're gonna move into spoilers for Ghostbusters.
All right, so now we're in spoilers.
So the one thing that was annoying to me, so I get that they wanted to have cameos from all the original cast, and I think that was to kind of help, one, because show like as an homage to the original film and show how much they loved it, while at the same time having some involvement from the original cast to kind of show people it's like, okay, well,
It's
the
still
original
connected
cast,
to it. It's
the
not
original
like, yeah.
cast, they're in on this, they're fans of it. It's not like Robert Englund shitting on the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot or remake.
well, it doesn't mean that any of them can't come out and retroactively shit on.
Yeah, but he was like, so it just shows you like everyone was kind of involved and on board with it. But to me, once I saw the first cameo, then it was very like, okay, when's the next one?
Well, the first cameo was actually the Harold Ramis statue.
Well, there was
I didn't even notice that.
you didn't?
when,
it was like the first shot of the
at
movie.
Columbia when she's
Yeah.
going to her office. There's a statue on the wall that's
It's like a
Harold
bust.
Ramis.
Oh, that's awesome. See, I was like, man, I wonder if they put Harold Ramis in there.
Yeah,
And
he
I
was like
wondering-
one of the first.
Oh,
it
that's
was-
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so having a
At
bust
the end,
of
it
his-
also says for Harold Ramis at the very end of the
So
credits.
having that bust, I think, was a very tasteful way to do it. Having him as like a CGI ghost or something, I thought would have been very distasteful.
Oh yeah, I don't think they would have done.
So having the bust, I think,
So was it old Harold Ramis or
it was like a
it was like
younger-
Egon.
Yeah, Egon-ish. Yeah.
But So, I think that, like, Bill Murray seemed like he was on board to do a cameo in this, much more so than he was to be involved with the Ghostbusters 3. But he seemed, like, very disinterested in being there. And it was, like, a very
his
flat
role in it,
performance.
too, I feel like they were playing Kristen Wiig, so she was very upset that there was, like, people that were skeptics of her because I think and that made sense for her character because she was, like, working to get tenure. Like, she was very much somebody that wanted to be respected and kind of believed and not, like, be laughed at. Well, he kind of was debunking their video and stuff, and then he comes to their office. And so I get that it kind of is motivation for her, but that kind of goes nowhere because it feels like it's a reason for him to be there and get thrown out the window.
It's a gratuitous cameo simply to have him in it, and then he didn't seem all that interested in doing much with it. And, so that one, I think, despite
But they didn't give him much to do with it.
Despite being the biggest name person they wanted to get in this and the cameo they wanted the most, I think that the others worked better.
Yeah. One thing is, just since we're in spoilers, they did kill him. So
yeah, they killed him. And like we said, it kind of went nowhere aside from just getting rid of that critical voice.
Yeah, I felt like there was almost a small character arc with her about people believing them and stuff, and it felt like it was going somewhere because it started from the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
He comes in, it's like, okay, maybe this is going somewhere, and then it kind of goes nowhere.
Yeah, I kind of would have preferred it if Bill Murray's character would have just been
on
like
TV or something.
Yeah,
like
just like the other ones, and maybe not even against or for them. Just a small cameo of him if they just even bumped into him or he delivered soup to him.
Because it feels like Kristen Wiig's character Erin is responsible for his death.
Yeah,
she
yeah, that's true.
In today's very lawsuit happy world, so I'm surprised that his estate wasn't
Gregory
suing.
Peck.
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that it doesn't.
So they didn't have the Walter Peck character, like the EPA,
which is good though because
like I said, they didn't remake it and use all the same elements, but they hit all the same beats, and I felt. To me, like the stuff with the mayor kind of felt like all these reboots of Spider-Man since the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi film have all worked so hard to not use the line "with great power comes great responsibility." They have like a 2-paragraph long like phrase to try to get around saying that. It's like, well, if you have the power to do stuff and you don't do it. So I felt like this was trying to work around not using the same elements as the first film while hitting all the same beats.
Yeah, I gotta say, like that line that I loved is when she's as he's eating, she says, "Don't be the mayor from Jaws."
Yeah,
like,
again, don't you call me the mayor from Jaws?
And again, like, even though I can only remember like maybe a handful of lines from this, like I've only watched it one time, but there was some very good.
Well,
lines
and the funny thing about the mayor is his reaction. Yeah. Like, he's been really mellow and nice. Don't you call me the mayor from Jaws?
Like, that's weighs on him.
That gets him like really upset. So that was actually a really good. Yeah, and it's funny too because we just talked about Jaws.
Yeah, I know.
But I've really enjoyed a lot of the comedy beats in it, and my favorite part of the movie, and just because there's a bunch of sucking stories that I could tell, but this one pertains to the movie, and he's like, I got two. They're like in there.
They're about to get fired.
Yeah, they're about to get fired from their community college, and they're trying to get funding. And he's like, "I got 2 words for you." And Melissa McCarthy's like, "He's going to say suck it." And Kristen was like, "He's not going to say suck it.
He's going to say you're fired."
Yeah, you're fired. Suck it. It was just so awesome.
No, she said it was going to be get out.
Get out. Yeah, yeah. Get out. No, it's going to be suck it. And then
so that was a great line. Like,
yeah.
There was stuff in there I really enjoyed, and then like the beginning with Zach Woods when he's like kind of a tour guide at a old like mansion. And he's like, and this is where P.T. Barnum first came with the idea to enslave elephants.
Yeah,
like mumbles it. Yeah,
that was pretty good. I just think to me, like that part's always gonna be funny, just because his humor was so subtle, and he just kind of like threw it in there.
Here's the thing, too: the original film, it felt very natural with their character interactions, and it did feel like some of it was ad-libbed. I feel like they very much took the same approach because some of this felt so natural. Like the thing about the Jaws mayor, it almost felt very alive, like more than just a camp. I almost feel like she thought of that there, whether she did or not.
Really good
but there was
line.
plenty of moments in this film where I feel like they kind of experiment with some scenes and maybe some comedy came out naturally based on the comedic actresses they had because they're so strong.
And a lot of them had backgrounds.
Yeah, like they're so strong.
So
like, I'm sure that just like elevated the film, just like it did with the original.
It seemed like that scene with the mayor, like the setup for it was very much trying to be a reference to the Louis Coley scene.
But he's like, there's not even a door there. She's trying to open it up. She's supposed to be a scientist. It's just, it's just windows with wood beams, and she's trying to pull it open. I mean,
I think it was interesting too that they actually had a plot of somebody like the guy that was kind of setting the
Yeah.
devices around. Like I thought that was interesting that played
Does
in.
anybody watch that and it's like Patton Oswalt would have been so perfect for that
Yeah,
role?
like I felt
And
the
why
guy,
couldn't they
the
have
guy they
gotten
got
him?
for that role kind of fell flat to me.
Yeah,
And
Patton
then-
Oswalt would have just
Yeah,
been
you're right,
incredible
you're right.
for that because I feel like maybe they even wrote it for him because that's all I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's like, why couldn't this have been
he
Patton
may have bowed
Oswalt?
out.
So I
because-
think that what's funny is
I would be
that
interested to know if he's ever thought for
the
it, 'cause
people,
it felt like it was supposed
the
to be for
people
him.
who really hated this movie because they're in the He-Man Woman Haters Club.
Mm-hmm.
That plot idea that the main bad guy was a dude that was kind of that type of person probably enraged them even further if they actually see this movie.
Well, is it Leslie Jones or somebody says something like, "It's always the pasty white guys or the pale white guys"?
Yeah, but I think it's I think it was Holtzman later when he kills himself that she says to the effect of it's always sad to lose a smart one or something.
Yeah,
to that effect.
yeah.
But it's just I don't know. I think that was less. I think in the end that was a less compelling thing than the Zool Gozer.
yeah, but I was wondering where they were going with it
Keymaster,
because
Gatekeeper.
I almost thought, was it Max Landis who wrote that original pitch for it? Not original, but he wrote one of the pitches for it. I believe it was him, and his story idea was basically that I think it was maybe the government was trying to weaponize ghosts, and I almost thought that's the direction they were going. That they were trying to draw out ghosts.
Well, it
and
kind of did.
Yeah. I thought I thought they were going in that direction, but he had saw the film and kind of had a reaction, and I felt like he would have mentioned that they took part of his idea from that. But
All right, what did everybody think about Slimer? Although it was a very small part, did y'all enjoy Slimer in it?
He
or
was
did you-
okay.
I liked it. Yeah. Like I liked Miss Slimer.
I'm glad they didn't reuse him as their first ghost capturing experience.
The biggest
I
problem
like that when he drives by in the ambulance.
Yeah.
So Melissa McCarthy's like, "Well, he's just having a good old time." Like my wife was laughing way out loud. Then
There was some funny moments. I liked Miss Slimer because it just kind of reminds you like Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man.
I don't know. I think that introducing a Miss Slimer.
No, I enjoyed it. Like it works because it's
I'm just
so
surprised.
ridiculous.
I wouldn't be surprised they try to work Slimer into being kind of like he was in the cartoons, kind of like a little sidekick.
I don't think they
I don't think
will.
I don't think they can go in that direction based on the way they've done it.
And they kind of killed him. But
They didn't really kill him.
one
Sent him
thing
back
I
to the
think is
ghost
funny is they
dimension.
did kill Ghost at the end because they had all the different weapons. She's like, I think I killed a pilgrim. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, and I feel like that could have been totally ad libbed. You know what I mean? Like there was so
I
many.
think at the end of the
thrown
movie, I think the biggest issue I have with the entire movie, the one scene that I watched that I did not like was the first ghost they caught because it was in the general public and I just
That
didn't
should have
love
been
it.
an.
Well, I love the mannequins walking around.
Yeah, I love the
That was
mannequin.
hilarious.
I
When
love
she's
Leslie
like, "Oh,
Jones's
there's a nightmare room."
Yeah, she's like, nope, not gonna, that was good. That was funny.
And then it kicks to the door.
Yeah,
Like,
it
that's
kicks
a
the
horror
door.
movie moment.
Yeah, and that's one thing. This one does have more horror moment. I can't talk horror
yeah.
movie moments than the original, but I liked a lot of the cast. I never felt like anything was forced,
Yeah.
and I feel like these people they all put together could actually get along really well.
But just to me,
you know?
a lot of the ghost stuff felt like the Haunted Mansion or something.
Yeah, but that's kind of.
I never saw Haunted Mansion.
I didn't.
Oh, I mean the
Luigi's
ride.
Mansion. But that's kind of what these movies are, or the way they went with this, and I'm fine with it because, I think more of the comedy is just kind of like the individual's interactions to the ghost. One thing I would have liked to have seen is more Holtzman reaction to the ghost because she never really reacted to him that much.
Was that
You know.
Kate McKinnon's character?
She was just so goofy. But
Yeah.
the like I said, I think that one thing that I can see the problem with is and Derek kind of poo pooed away the logic
I
of
don't
just
poo-poo
blowing
nothing
and
away.
killing up ghosts. I think they did that solely just to have bigger action set pieces.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would have
Yeah.
rather, instead of having that huge glob of CGI at the end with kind of beam in the sky type stuff and then a city-sized Ghostbusters logo monster, I would have rather they have spread that out throughout the movie more and
Yeah.
have more instances of ghost busting.
Yeah.
But speaking of the scene where everything breaks loose, Kristen Wiig's character is on the other side. She flags a cab down, and we hadn't saw Dan Aykroyd yet. And then Dan Aykroyd's won the cab, and he was great.
I thought he was okay. He
No,
was
I
doing
really
this
enjoyed it.
accent. He was doing an accent like a New York kid.
one thing-
And I thought it was all right.
Yeah, no, I
but-
loved it because he's like, "This is just a
Oh, you're
class
afraid of
five."
no ghosts.
Yeah, he's like,
I mean,
I ain't
I was
afraid of no
like-
ghosts.
I was okay with it.
The sad
thing-
thing is, that's the best thing he's done in like 15
The thing that they haven't described though is I thought so. Didn't they keep all their equipment at their base?
Yeah.
So how did Kristen Wiig's character get her equipment? Because
Yeah.
it looked like when
Melissa McCartney got possessed,
when Abby got possessed, she destroyed Aaron's equipment. So
but they also may have had, I don't know, it's just movie magic. Batman, I don't want to talk about it, will you?
Yeah.
You're going to be like, well, you know, Batman at one time.
I mean, I understand that these are like kids' movies and stuff, really, but it's just like things like that. It's like, okay, I don't really care, but that should have been addressed.
Yeah, but there's a lot of movies that just don't address
If they
those
just
things.
had a throwaway line, it's like, where's your stuff at? It's like, well, I'll keep a spare at the apartment or something.
Yeah. Oh, one other line too I liked is when Slimer took the Ghostbusters mobile and drove off. She's like, "Oh, he's gave him a nuclear warhead or something to that effect."
But he doesn't have any feet; he can't drive.
Well, he has ghost.
They show the
powers.
pedal go down.
Yeah.
Chris Hemsworth stuff. I loved him.
He was very
Especially-
funny, like-
especially when the something makes a loud. He talks about not wearing the glasses because he doesn't want.
Yeah, he said, well, they kept getting smudged, so I took them out, and now they don't get smudged.
He took the lenses out of his glasses.
And then something makes a. What is he? He does something to make the connection of his of his hearing.
Oh,
like
the
his
gong!
eyes.
He hits the gong. He's like, "Oh, it's so loud."
Yeah. And they're like,
holding
did he
his
just cover his eyes?
And he's like, "I can hear the noise."
so
And one thing too, like one thing I did enjoy this, they didn't have like a romantic love story interest or anything in it, which I think was a good way to go. Because, like you said, they done that.
there
in
was
the original.
the movie is 2 hours long already, and they spent way too much time on the third act ghost stuff.
I will say that. Well, I think
It would have been way overstuffed to put
One
in
thing
a
that
romance.
happened with the movie, and I kind of think it started off really funny, and then it had really good comedy beats, and then toward the end, when it got to sort
It's
of
plot heavy.
yeah, it's got
It
plot
had-
heavy.
yeah, I mean, it's
and
hard
it
to-
kind of sludged it down.
It's hard to
just a little
solve
bit.
that. You know what I mean? It's hard. I mean, it's not saying it's impossible, but that is a problem a lot of comedies have.
Well, yeah.
That's why I think.
But this did not click it. This is not Adam Sandler at all.
No,
so I was happy.
No, I mean, like I think too, just like I said, like the original film, you kind of have the Zool stuff kind of peppered throughout the screenplay, so it all kind of builds to a logical conclusion. And they didn't want to ape that, although if you stay for the post-credit spoiler, they have a reference to that, and that'll probably be the next movie. I just wish
Wait, what was a post credit spoiler? I'm trying to think.
they're
It was-
listening to an EVP, and she's like, "Listen to this," and then it says Zool.
No, she's like,
She says, "I heard."
Did you say all the way to the very, very end?
Like after the credits.
Yeah, like
over with?
after everything was completely over.
They're sitting there in the
okay. Yeah,
lab,
it's at
and
the
she's listening to an
very end.
EVP, and then she says something to the effect of like, "Who's Zool?" or "What's Zool?"
that's
or-
cool.
But I think I think I'd like to see a take on that. I think it'd be
I don't know. It's just like with the Star Trek reboots when they had to do Wrath of Khan over, but hide the fact that it was kind of like when they redo these properties, just do different stories where you're not just retreading the same.
But here's the thing,
ground.
though, they can do it differently because they haven't set any of the same stuff up. So you could do a main thing.
And it'd just be like a callback in a certain
but
way.
another thing too, they might not even get.
Yeah.
Well, it's
a
like the
sequel,
Superman
so-
movies. The Superman movies, they always have to do the same 3 villains.
Well, because that's all he's got.
Well, and real quick too, I meant to bring this up earlier. I know some people early on were talking about like, oh, well, they shouldn't do all female. They should do like a mix with male and female. And yeah, a lot of the humor and stuff, they kind of it could be interchanged with
gender
general
neutral.
neutral or whatever. But for me, that other one was kind of a boys' club film. Like you know what I mean? They talked about Dana a little bit, and you know what I mean. Like
Well, you saw
that-
Bill Murray or Vinkman being kind of a skis. when
Yeah, and they
he's-
all kind of were looking at each other like, oh, like that was very much a boys' club film.
Yeah.
This, I think it was smart to have all girls because they could, people act differently when they're all around guys or all around girls. They just do. So like the girls are all together and then talking about Chris Hemsworth. You know what I mean? Like I think it should have been a girls' club film because the other one was a boys' club film.
one thing too,
I love that about it, and I don't think they should have mixed it up because then it would have felt almost too generic. Like you feel like you're more looking into them into their personal life. You know what I mean? They're being more, I guess, honest with each other maybe because there isn't a mixture of genders.
But
there.
I did like too when they were interviewing him, and like Kristen Wiig was like, "So do you see?" And like and Melissa McCarthy's like, "Well, we don't want to get a lawsuit."
She said, "Are you seeing anyone?"
Yeah.
And then
He's like, "I see you
and
all."
then Kate McKinnon, as she's realizing how dumb he is, she's like ready. She's like, "Yes, I want to hire this guy because he's so stupid."
she's like, "Is he a robot?"
Yeah, I just love it. Like he tries to reach the phone, and it's in the fish tank. He's like, "Yeah, your phone's in the fish tank or fish submarine." That's what it was.
Yeah.
Not a fish tank.
He's like, is it fish tanks or submarines?
Yeah, I know that one other scene too I like is at the end when he's possessed. And he's like, that's a little Peter Pan. I'm just gonna go with it. And he has like sparkles behind him, like.
And then at the end, when they're like, "Where did you get that sandwich?"
He's like, I went to the deli.
I was looking for you
like,
guys.
You know what? And she throws a sandwich, like, somebody help me out. And they just throw it back to him. He keeps eating. It's like, that was funny because I'm not used to seeing him in a comedic role,
Yeah.
So it's
So-
it's he was it was real. I can't talk. Well written for him.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I laughed.
And
a
he
lot in
played
this
it.
film.
I think the reason why he worked so effectively is he was so deadpan about it.
Yeah.
Like you really believed that he was that stupid.
Well,
so.
like I said, I think that to me I just wish they had done like all these movies, the big budget movies, get over $100 million.
I feel like this could have got more.
They all
plays.
have third act problems, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like even a lot of the Marvel movies have like a villain problem and a third act.
Well, they kill
problem.
all of them, so they don't have any villains.
Well, it's like the third act is always the most problematic aspect of all these movies, and it's just to me this felt like a big CGI glob of characters flying around, and they tried to build in hero moments for everyone.
Well, I don't really know if they had. The only real hero moment was when Kristen Wiig tried to save McCartney, and that was really.
Well, they
Kate McKinnon like is using the two guns.
yeah,
like, as the
yeah,
whips,
that,
you know?
yeah.
And then Leslie Jones or Patty used the shredder.
Yeah.
I liked
and
that. I like
then
the shredder.
Melissa
Yeah.
McCarthy did some stuff, and
I like
she
how
had
you-
like the glove thing. And
I mean, I didn't think it was like extremely weak. I just thought it. Yeah,
I'll say-
absolutely, it wasn't as good as
Yeah.
like the rest of the film. But I was fine with it. I had
Yeah.
so many laughs up to that point.
But just like the main villain turns into the huge emblem or the logo for the
Yeah.
Ghostbusters and just walks through the city about 3 blocks, and
Yeah.
they shoot him in the crotch.
Well, it
and he
also
goes
kind
away.
of looked like a character from a Tim Burton movie, but I can't remember what it was called. I have to think about it. But anyway, I was happy with all of it. You know, like, yeah, a little weak at the end, but like you said, even...
I mean, the original
a lot of-
Ghostbusters, they just kind of get knocked down and then just cross the streams at the Marshmallow Man.
That was
so-
the one. That was one thing too. I was kind of glad they didn't address crossing the streams. Like, I'm glad they didn't go there
Yeah.
because that to me is like such an iconic line that I'm glad they didn't touch
Yeah.
it. And they may eventually do it, but they didn't approach it.
I loved all the experimentation with the stuff, though,
Yeah.
especially like in the subway and things. You know, it's just
Yeah.
like, why am I testing this? Well, you got the longest arms.
yeah. And she's like, well, I got to put this around your neck.
yeah.
or
So I need to ground you.
yeah. One other scene we hadn't talked about Ernie Hudson yet because we were all could agree we came like, where's Ernie
Yeah, I
Hudson
was
going to be
waiting
at?
for him.
Yeah, I was going to the end. I'm
And-
like, where's his cameo? Did they leave him out?
He turns out to be Patty's uncle, which me and Sean
I love
anyway
that.
agreed because like Ernie Hudson always seemed to be the one that wanted to be involved with it the most. So I would be completely fine if he got some
Well,
type of a.
I think it goes into there's 2 layers. One is that allows him to possibly be involved in future movies.
Yeah.
But then the other one goes back to the same thing I said about the character of Patty being kind of similar to his character in that it's kind of just a token character that gets brought in that's not one of the scientists.
Yeah.
Is that they had to connect the only 2 major black
Well-
stars they wanted to have in
Well,
it.
I don't think they need to bring him in as a Ghostbuster.
No,
I think like again,
No, just
he
involved.
He owns a funeral parlor. Like
Yeah.
he
so he could just be cameos.
there
and
could be
show up.
something happening at the funeral
But
parlor or whatever.
I enjoyed the way they did it, and two though the Patty character was much more involved in this than Ernie Hudson.
Yeah,
was
she
in the
came in
original.
sooner and had more
She,
involvement.
yeah, and she was, and she has some funny moments in it.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed all
Yeah.
of it. So
Imagine too if they like lost the firehouse because you could see that happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kind of fall out. If their new base was in the basement of a funeral parlor,
Yeah.
you know, and they drove the hearse out with the Ghostbusters logo.
Well, I like too. She's like, "Oh, we got dead." When she first brings it, there's a dead body in the back, and
I can
Holtzman's
think
like,
of 6 uses
yeah.
for a cadaver today.
"Yeah." She's like, "No, we can't do that. I gotta take it back."
yeah. That's,
And she's like, "And we can't have 2 bodies stacked on top of each other." Like, there's just a bunch of stuff. I really enjoy it.
yeah,
Like,
this has a lot of great lines that I.
yeah, I think one thing too that kind of happened with this is that like, and maybe I'm being a little partial because of all the haters on it, made me want to like it. Like I was like, I want to like.
Well, I
this
went in
movie.
like trying to just separate myself from all the fear around it because
But I
it's
can't-
hard to take that out of
Yeah.
context.
But I don't either watching the movie because like
If there was no, if
I-
there was
I
no,
just don't
on,
see
if there was
any
no
reason to hate it.
online like misogyny-driven hate campaign against the film, and it was just the general anti-remake backlash,
It'd be different.
I don't think anybody would really have any huge problems with ever watching
No.
it. I mean, it wasn't as. It's not atrociously bad. It's
don't
not,
think it was bad.
I'm just saying it's not atrociously
we
bad.
all have different opinions, but
Well, I'm just saying the basic level is
Yeah.
it's not atrociously bad enough to make everyone be like, oh, you shit on my memories. I mean, I think like it just boils down to the main thing people have a problem with is like, oh, there's this new property that's based on this property I love with different people involved, and other people are going to say it's better than the original, and that's going to make them mad. And I get that and I understand that. But at the end of the day, I don't think this movie's going to overwrite the original, and they still exist, so you can go watch them.
Yeah.
But I think we've covered enough about this movie to bring this to a close.
Alrighty. Well, we don't know what we're doing next week, right?
Lights Out comes out 21st.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
we'll do
That will bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video